All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'll keep my eye on if any others come in. Thank you everyone for joining us for October meeting. We had a special meeting a couple weeks ago, so it seems like a short turnaround. Although I see Gary, who's had a nice break from us, I'm sure, but good to have you back, Gary. I'll probably be leading most of tonight's discussion, but I guess Boris and Rebecca, did you have anything on the front end of discussion around outreach that you wanted to add or I was thinking about?
Oops, sorry, I was muted. No, I think we're in a good place. We're gonna, we have the public meetings scheduled, let's see, the 1st of November, and I believe the 5th of November. I should bring that up before I say the wrong dates, but I think the 1st and the 5th, is that right? Yeah. So, you know, I think the focus will be on the service scenarios that we talked about on our last call. So if anybody has, like, over the past week or two had a chance to, you know, process any of that and they have anything they want to share with us tonight, then please do. Otherwise, Adam, I think it's pretty much your show tonight.
Okay. Yeah, Gary, go ahead, jump in.
Yeah, I'm awfully sorry I missed the 12th meeting, the October 12th meeting. I was traveling and had no access, but I was able to view the entire video when I got back. It was a good meeting and understood it pretty well. I had a couple of questions. First of all, it was a little challenging to understand the difference between the microtransit schemes in scenarios 1 and 2. I understood in scenario 1, there were zones that encourage you to use microtransit within a zone and a fixed route outside the zone. I understood that concept, but I never did fully understand scenario 2 and how it worked and whether rates were going to vary with distance of trips and that kind of thing. So I'm curious, again, perhaps you could briefly explain
Yeah.
that. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's in scenario 2, we are proposing one zone for the entire city of Lawrence, and then there's a sort of an overlay that focuses on the university. But as far as most riders in the city, they would have access. There would be no restrictions on where they could go without having to transfer, but there would be a distance-based pricing scheme. So in both cases, the whole idea is to reduce the average length of trips, because that way you can
flexibility of a varying rate door-to-door possibility, and also actually I think you almost could combine the two into a system that allowed someone to take a low fare trip on microtransit to the fixed rate stop, and then at the other end as well, but also take a long trip across the city at a higher rate. So I'd love to see those kind of combined together. The other thing, Boris, that I wanted to say, and Adam mentioned this during the meeting, that I wasn't there and I would probably have something to say, and I do, and that's scenario 1, route 3. It calls for, it's basically as you know, a downtown to hub connector, but scenario 1 runs through, uses Crestline to go through Sunset Hill Neighborhood Association, Sunset Hill Neighborhood. And Crestline is a problematic street. It's the two worst streets in our neighborhood are 9th and Crestline, with Crestline having very special problems that need to be addressed before we put a bus on that street in any deeper. So that's something will have great difficulty selling to the neighborhood, would be a bus that ran the full length of Crestline from 9th to Bob Billings.
Okay.
And that's all I had. Thank you.
Gary, let me ask you on that. And I think this is a question that I don't know if it's completely fair right now, but we'll see what you think. Part of when I have discussions about people who are concerned about buses through neighborhoods, and in some cases at least, it's about noise, which will be one of the things we're able to address as we transition to an electric fleet. Do you have any sense, I mean, I know you can't speak for everybody through the neighborhood, but is that one of the primary concerns on on Crestline. I know it sounds like there's some street quality issues that we would have to be thinking about as well, but I just didn't know in our efforts to electrify the fleet, as we have a quieter and quieter system, I know that some people tend to ask us, if a bus is going to come through here, can it be a small one? And in a lot of cases, I think that's a reflection of people's desire for it to be quieter. So I don't know if you had any sense of that in the discussion at Sunset Hills.
I certainly think it would help if we could reassure people that we are moving to electric and the noise would be less of an issue in the future. I think it would help, but I think the main concern for the neighbors is some physical features on Crestline that make it challenging. First of all, it is extremely difficult at the intersection of Harvard and Crestline at start and stop times of school. That's right on the corner of West Middle School, and there's normally large backups of cars. It's an extremely dangerous situation that needs to be mitigated, but a bus in there would really be challenging at 8 o'clock and at 3:05. So the other problem is that Crestline is hilly and limited sight distance from the top of the hill at Orchard down to Harvard and Westdale, and on the other side to Stratford and Oxford University. So as you go up to the top of the hill on Crestline, there's a curve on the other side to the north. So very limited sight distance, and people get going down the hill, and then to throw a bus into that mix seems problematic. But I think if people did raise an objection to it, that we might be able to reassure them that one bus an hour or two buses an hour might be workable. But that was one of the very first things that people say to me is, we can't have any more traffic problems on Crestline. It's already a real problem.
Okay. Right. Well, I included some prompts in the agenda itself as some of what I hope to hear from the group tonight. And one of the first things I was hoping to hear from folks is just if any of you have had a chance to take the survey or look through it, and if you had any feedback about that experience. I think it's we had lots of discussions and back and forth with our team at Foursquare trying to figure out the right way to deliver a lot of complex information to people. Make sure they have the right info, supplemented by static images, supplemented by video. It's a little more dynamic, supplemented by an ArcGIS map that people could move around themselves to turn on and off what they wanted. Something like a major route redesign is just by its nature complex. So I think that's one of my concerns is we'll see how people navigate it. But I'd be interested to hear from this group if you've had a chance to get in there, been a little more involved in the process, but what your experience was like, anything stand out as working well, not working well, that we can maybe think about as we do our other outreach that is talking with people and is not survey focused, but trying to identify issues that people might have. So maybe stop there and see if anybody has any first thoughts, feedback to getting in the survey.
Adam, this is Chris Tilden. As you said, it's an incredibly complex amount of information. I found it relatively difficult, even having sat through last month's meeting, to complete it myself. But I'm not sure how to overcome that. I did wonder about the possibility of providing the opportunity for folks to do the route by route analysis up front if they chose to do so. It might then flow into kind of the comments about the overall, scenario 1 versus scenario 2. I haven't completed it. I got to the route by route analysis though, so I've been through a fair portion of it. And I wondered if having both options, like you could start with the route by route analysis and then address the more general first. You know, I'm not sure how many individuals will get to do the route by route. I mean, it does take a lot of time and energy to evaluate each of those, but you know, kudos on. I mean, obviously you put an incredible amount of thought and energy with the maps linking to the video with the narrative explanation. You know, aside from reordering, I don't know that I've got a lot of definitive ideas about how to make it simpler.
This is Gary Weber. I took it today, completed the survey, and I have to second Chris's statement. I found that I went through it in the way it was expected. I answered the general questions first and then went route by route. And I found that my first impression was that I liked one scenario better than the other. And so I answered the questions in that way. But then after I'd gone through each one route by route, I realized I like components of both scenarios, and that it was much more difficult for me to say this one is better than that one, because I'd seen each route, and especially the interlining and how that worked together. So I think if you could get away with it, plunging right into the route would be the best way to generate the data you're looking for. I looked at those broader questions, and I was a little confused by where you were going with the questions. It asked like you were kind of asking for praise with what do you like and what should we continue exploring. It's good to ask for what people like, but I would think some people are going to want to tell you what goes away that they liked in the current situation or was not offered in either scenario. And you might want to give them a chance to be critical as well as complimentary. At least that's how it came off sounding to me. Maybe I misread it. I'm not real sure, but I found it actually fun to do the route to route. I was able to bring up the two routes, bring up the routes, both scenarios on the interactive map. One thing I noticed on the interactive map, when I brought up all the routes, they came up in all different colors. Maybe I'm confused about this, but then when I tried to compare them route for route, they all came out black. And anywhere that they overlapped each other was difficult to see where each one went. So I enjoyed using the interactive map, but when I called individual routes up, they were all black, which then they tended to blend together, and you couldn't really see how they were interlining and working together. Maybe, I'm not sure. Maybe you could look into that.
Yeah, those are good feedback points. I think, well, a couple of reactions or thoughts are, yeah, about the criticisms. I think you're right. I think our intent, I was trying to look back how we had framed that. I thought we asked a question about gaps, like what are notable gaps are there. I think that was our intent, to try to get some of the negative to come out. So hopefully through that. I was trying to remind myself, I think on the route by route, I think we just kept it general, just, you know, what are your thoughts? We didn't kind of probe for good or bad. We just assumed people would give us that in one text box. The interactive map, that one was tricky. I know this went through a number of iterations. And I guess I'll explain to you how it got to the place it did. And we could help decide if that was the right way or the wrong way. But it's true that if you look at the system maps of all three options, the current, scenario 1 or scenario 2, those are maps that show multicolored routes. When we were looking at like a given route and wanted people to be able to compare those, let's do a little bit of screen share here. Those were all, they kept the same color scheme so that you could see how they overlaid with each other. But you're correct that if as an example, turn on one of the scenario 2s. That's also black. So like all the scenario 2 routes are black, but we were concerned that if we had multicolored everything, that, you know, in the event someone was trying to overlay, you know, all the different things that could happen with route 1, that they might end up with 2 colors that didn't contrast. So then they wouldn't be able to tell, you know, how the different scenarios of route 1 were. So that was one of those tricky things to try to weigh, you know, what ways it could potentially be laid out. But I hear you on how that could be, you know, depending on these different ways you kind of slice the pie or look at it differently, it might not get you exactly what you're looking for. The other thing, and I would like to hear more on other folks' experiences as they've gone through this. The one thing I'd offer is some confidence that the survey is not the end all for how we get rich information of what people think of these 2 scenarios. I think what you'll see, or maybe what you've already looked at in the agenda with a number of the different in-person outreach opportunities we've had, have highlighted the value of conversations, and how much more quickly we can get people to tell us about what routes they take now, what they don't want to see go away, what they'd like to see change. And then we can help facilitate that conversation by showing them the routes or the maps that help people understand that. So we do want to continue to press on the survey and get as many responses as we can and get good feedback through it. But I guess for the group, recognize that it is one tool in a bunch of different tools that we're trying to employ to get good information from people over the next month. Any other thoughts on experiences taking the survey?
This is Laura. I will just share that I found it very overwhelming. I certainly do not think of myself as somebody that is well-versed in transit in general. And so maybe somebody who's more familiar with, say, Lawrence geography and rides transit regularly may feel less overwhelmed. And maybe that's the point for people like that to take this survey. But it was like, I was so overwhelmed that I was like, I don't think I can take this. So I actually didn't do the survey. But, you know, in thinking about whether it could be somewhat designed in a way that would be similar to how it might be brought to community and like community conversation and public input discussions. I would think, and I could be wrong, that a lot of people might want to have the option to select the routes that they ride most often. So maybe it would look like could look like the transit schedule with the routes, but also like a map with the links to those routes. And it could, like, if you highlighted on the schedule, it'd highlight where that route was or something like that. And then people could click like scenario 1 versus scenario 2 and provide feedback directly right there, because they're going to want to comment on the ones that they ride most often or most familiar with.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think people do want to zero in on what they most care about. I think we hoped that, and maybe it's a matter of order, but I think we hoped that people would get to that route by route page and just give us comments on the ones that they ride the most, so that they could see how those different scenarios would play out. So it's maybe a matter of getting people kind of to the place they need to be. And some of that, like I mentioned, I think a lot of that we get there very fast when we are at tabling events. I was just at Just Food doing a tabling event, and someone walks up to you, and within 2 minutes, you understand which 1 or 2 routes they care about. So we talk about those maps, what it means to them, you know, what alternatives would be if there are gaps that are created. And that's a very rich data set information that is also informing us. And maybe we never get a survey response from that person because it is a lot.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to put that in the front so it kind of mirrors what a public input discussion might be like. Because if somebody comes in and they're already overwhelmed, they might not ever get to that point at all because they don't feel like they're going to be capable or have the capacity to get to that point.
This is Melissa. I really like Laura's suggestion, and I completely agree with what she's saying there. I also felt the general scenario leading with that was really overwhelming. I felt like I needed to just really study our transit system as a whole, and I think a lot of folks are not going to feel like they have time for that. But I would echo that. I mean, that's my experience of transit is just there are a handful of routes that I have used, and those would be the ones that I understand how those are going to impact me. So.
This is Gary Weber. From the perspective of the president of a neighborhood association, it's probably just coincidence, but timing of these surveys can be really challenging for my neighborhood members. Like for example, right now there are 3 surveys that I would like to ask them to take, all of which are relatively dense. And it's pretty intimidating for someone who's a member of a neighborhood association to be asked to put in an hour and a half to fill out 3 surveys. So if there's some way that we could talk to each other a little bit more and try to stagger these surveys so that there's one coming out and then next month there's another one and the month after that instead of having all 3 at one time with a very similar deadline, it makes it kind of challenging.
This is Chris. One other thing I would add, I don't know that it's feasible. It was a little hard to jump back and forth to understand where a route was interlining with another route. Did you consider adding the interlined route so you could see that big picture, or is that just create in your minds just too much confusion as well?
We had a lot of discussions about how to show stuff, and I guess to clarify, you mean on the like the route by route static maps, having interlined routes together? Maybe?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, some people are just less comfortable in the interactive maps, so may just rely on the static maps. Yeah.
Yeah, we did talk about that a little bit. Part of the challenge was, different interlines occurred under the 2 scenarios. So it's yet another layer of complexity. Those static maps were based on looking at the same route across different scenarios. And if those are interlined differently under the 2 scenarios, all of a sudden those maps can get more complex than they already are. So you're talking maybe 5 routes on a map across 2 scenarios and current. So for now, the interactive was kind of the place where it lives. And I think beyond that, I think it's talking with people is probably the place where we can communicate what those interlines mean. Because even within a couple of days of the survey coming out, we had some concerns over a scenario because it looked like someone would have to transfer. So talking through what interlining would mean for that person and that they wouldn't have to leave the bus as they transition from one route to another is something that I don't know it's even possible for us to concisely, simply get that across in a survey. That information almost has to be translated some other way, usually in person or kind of in a conversation over the phone would be more effective.
Adam, would it be helpful maybe to have sort of bookend public meetings where we have sort of the first set or the first, one or two meetings, and hopefully a lot of people show up. Hopefully they get to hear and discuss all the scenarios and route by route, and then we encourage them to take the survey. But maybe a week or two later, we offer them something like office hours, or I don't even know how to describe it, but like a follow-up public meeting where we can say, okay, we know that some of you dove into the survey over the past week. It may have raised more questions than answers. So, we're here to try to help it again and kind of have a bookend of public meetings.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always, I guess I'm always concerned when, I don't know that we'll ever get all the audiences we need to talk with us to come to the couple of like virtual meetings we have where everything's explained. I think kind of as Laura mentioned, Melissa mentioned, people care about their routes. And I think we were seeing it as, the survey is out there and we hope people have checked it out. We're sure that there's probably a lot of people who aren't ready or don't feel like they'll maybe ever be ready to get into it. So we hope that over this month, all the different open houses and tabling and virtual opportunities are places where we're touching base with people, and hopefully where they already are. A lot of our tablings are at events or places where people are going to be without us having to beg them to come and talk transit with us. So I guess that's how I would think about my answer to your point, is I think I'm not sure the confidence level I have on getting everybody to join us for the first public meeting, look at the survey, follow a public meeting, all that time invested to get us the right survey response. I think people are going to approach us in a lot of different ways over the next month, and we're going to approach them in a lot of different ways to like proactively try to have the right conversations with people. I think the survey serves a tool for some people in our community, but not everybody. And we'll have to talk with the others to get to extract the appropriate route level feedback that we need.
So one other idea, what about like an informational line or email? Like I'd be willing to put my email out there, and if somebody has a question they just can't figure it out, they could send me an email and I can respond as soon as possible with a deeper explanation of what the scenarios are doing, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, so the ways, beyond just the events, and I guess that link is in the agenda, but the confirmed events we have and then the others that we're looking at, we have already, people are using our info at Lawrence Transit email to tell us, I don't understand this, or I tried to understand microtransit and don't get it, help me understand it. Those have already started coming through to a certain degree. So people, I think, are reaching out in that way. So happy to pass some of that along to you all. And we can certainly, like in a communication effort, be reminding people, if you've checked out the survey and don't feel like you quite have what you need, here's some other ways to interact with us. Can make kind of continued efforts to do it that way if that sounds useful to the group.
This is Melissa. If this is already being done and I've missed it, I apologize. But I'm wondering if the route by route questions, the scenarios could be presented to the folks who are writing those routes. Like if you made the comparisons available, like just a print for like Route 1, people who are writing Route 1, that's available on Route 1 buses, so that they could see what's being proposed for specific routes without, and then maybe a link to the survey as a whole. Would that maybe be a way to raise awareness of the proposals from the people who are writing those routes and just get input specifically from those writers.
It's an interesting thought, yeah. Of course, my gut reaction is the time and effort it would take to put that package together for each route. Doesn't mean we shouldn't do it or that we can't do it. That's just like the first reaction I would have. I know we're aiming to table at the bus platform itself, catching people as they're waiting for the bus, transferring between buses, and hopefully have the route level discussions at that point. I'm intrigued by the idea that you bring up because of its bite-sized nature. Maybe people can get at the information that matters to them in a more digestible way that lets them ignore the stuff they maybe care less about. So I'm intrigued by that, to think more about how that could maybe happen.
I have a suggestion. So this is Freddie Gibb from PTAC. Could you think about like doing like a direct sampling, like having maybe transit staff like on the bus, talking to people on the bus at the time? Or would that be too much? Sample about 30 or 40 people, that could be a good estimate.
Yeah, certainly it's a good idea, Freddie. It's certainly something we've done before. And we're probably at the point where we'll need to evaluate the right and the best way to utilize staff time. I think I can bring this up if that's helpful, but the community events we have on the books are extensive, and we're stretched thin. So we'll, I think something like that is probably a good idea, though. It'd be a matter of, which places might we decide, maybe instead of tabling here for 2 hours, maybe we spend that time kind of in a focused effort on bus riders. I think that's an adjustment we can make.
Yeah, because I feel like that's the more, just appropriate route in regards to trying to getting people to do your surveys. If you're taking the survey directly to them, even if they're just waiting to.
Yes, and you bringing that up makes me think of we're still working to schedule some route redesign focused outreach on Haskell's campus, and I think we imagine that as kind of having we expect to have discussions about what routes will come to and from Haskell, and kind of have a focused discussion about how it affects a certain area, a certain group of riders. So thinking about doing that.
Yeah.
Too.
And to follow on your email that you sent earlier, the confirmation is at November 17th around 6:30 at Sacred Ground.
Perfect. Thank you for helping with that. All right. I'm trying to phrase this question. So we've had some discussion about how to think about making the survey a more approachable tool, about how to reach people in a little different ways that maybe get more quickly to the conversations we want to be having with people. Are there any, you all on this call represent a lot of different user groups. Have you had thoughts as you've seen the information about, a better way to convey this or to talk with people about it would be this other strategy, this other method that we're not doing? Right now we've talked about survey, tabling, we'll have an open house at the library, of course, virtual meetings. Any thoughts on other strategies to have the right conversations with people? It might be something you give some thought. It might be tough to think of in the moment, but I think we're in the period where we want to be creative and how we're talking with people about really every project that we do, but this one in particular has enough complexity that we'll have to keep trying different avenues to get the right info out of folks. So be thinking about that.
Yeah, this is August 1st. I just, and you probably have mentioned this, or I didn't see it in the agenda. Will writers see these proposed scenarios 1 and 2 just on the bus without taking the survey? Or is there any way for me as a Route 1 writer or a Route 5 writer, will I know my route is proposed for a change without taking the survey, just based on literature or posting on the bus? Or, I mean, obviously I know there's online campaigns, but as a writer, how would I know my route's changing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So right now we have in the writer alert panel, so the panel that's up right behind the driver is where we put our kind of PSA information for passengers. So if there's reroutes or a survey online, that's where that information would be. So we have information there that, tells people route redesign is happening. There's info on the website and at this survey. We have not, the idea came up to have more tailored information by route on those buses. I'll have to think a little more about that. I like the targeted nature of that. Operationally, it's not easy. We send out different buses on different routes every day. So we'll have to think more about how we get anything beyond just kind of a link to the website or a link to the survey. It may need to be something similar to what Freddie suggested, where it's a person who's, it'll be a sampling effort. We won't catch everybody, but we might have to interact kind of directly with people about, we need you to understand things are changing, are likely to change in some way next year, and we need your thoughts on what that means for Route 1, for example. Okay. I'm going to pivot to one of the other bullet points on this line and just bring up the confirmed events that we're looking at, that we already have scheduled, and then some others that are either yet to be scheduled or are with a specific kind of user group that's not wide open to the public. And if folks have access to those, I can bring them up also. We are, like I said, trying to get staff everywhere we can. If there is, if you do have any capacity to join us at any of these, that helps us have more conversations with people, deeper conversations, and can be a really helpful thing in your role. I know you all have committed quite a bit of time just being with us virtually so frequently, but any help at any of these tabling events would be welcomed by us. Certainly helps us talk with more folks, because it's pretty common just in the handful of tables we've been at already. You can get pretty easily in a 10, 15-minute conversation with someone and not be able to devote attention to others who could use a conversation. So if anybody has any quick thoughts on ones that stood out to you that you might be interested in joining up at, you can please let me know either now or after the meeting, but we'll be doing several events each week over the next 3 weeks, all leading up to the November 19th end date for the survey.
Adam, how are you recording feedback at the tabling events?
It's a good question. So we've got, we have comment cards that have a few prompts on them. So we gather information about if people do currently ride, what routes or services do they already use with us. If we're able to talk through them, the different scenarios and kind of what they mean, there is a question about preference of scenario 1 or scenario 2 based on that conversation. And then there's an open an open box for them to say really anything they want to say. In a lot of these conversations, sometimes people will want to just think about it and write themselves. In a lot of other cases, we're just talking with them and writing notes as they talk with us, so that feedback can be recorded.
Mm-hmm.
Adam, can we? Sorry, Adam. Can we find that list of tabling events somewhere?
Yes. So I will put in chat the agenda.
And then my second question is: do you have maybe a quick how-to list? For example, I think that the Health Equity Working Group of Food Policy Council might be interested in helping, but would they know what to do if they arrived? Like, what are the takeaways you need to get? What are the materials they'll have? And are there any quick talking points? Like, is there a quick how-to?
It's all good questions. So worth noting that we are not asking anyone to table alone. So you'll always have a staff person with you. Perfect. So they can help kind of provide that guidance when you're having those discussions, or if you get a question you're not sure of, there will be a resource there as a backup. So we would have all the printed materials and everything that we would need. So anyone who would help out, we would just ask that they meet us at that location.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I think as far as preparation goes, we're certainly willing to have a discussion with somebody if they'd like to feel a little more confident before they're showing up on site. Mm-hmm. We're happy to talk through kind of how our conversations have gone so far. I think we're learning, each time the right questions to be asking, what gets us to the right place as we're talking with people. So we can share some of those lessons learned.
That sounds great. And so if we, if myself or a working group member wanted to sign up, they would just contact you?
I think that's the right way to start. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
The other thing that reminds me of that I want to highlight is our list is ever evolving. So if there's a certain constituent group of people that you think we should talk to, and they have a group or an event, some way where we can go to people, kind of like I mentioned, where they're at, we're happy to evaluate if we can do that. Trying to have not only a lot of conversations, but conversations with the right people. So if we're missing folks, or there's other groups that are useful for us to be talking to, we're open to being connected and trying to make that work.
Hey, Adam, this is Quiz. Real quick, just in general, how long does the survey take to fill out approximately?
I'm going to let a couple of folks who took it answer that. Gary, Chris, any feedback on how long it took you?
Yes, I did the whole survey. I commented on all the route changes. I watched about 5 or 6 videos, were all 30 seconds to 2 minutes long. I looked at the interactive map. I think I spent about 45 minutes with it.
Okay. I was just something that I was thinking about off of Freddie's suggestion about going to where the folks are at actually on the route. Maybe there's a way we could get some iPhones or handhelds from KUIT, have them download a QR code and go to those folks. And as the suggestion was, kind of switch the survey around where they could see the actual route they're riding, and maybe start with that. But obviously, if it's 45 minutes long, we wouldn't be able to, get folks to do it while they're on their bus trip probably. But that's a suggestion. If you think we could incorporate that somehow, I could check with IT to see if we can get some of the hardware that may be able to help us with surveys.
I think those are questions worth asking. I think the success of onboard surveys are the facilitation of the person helping. So like as a staff person and whoever's doing that outreach, I think we can quickly use an iPhone or a tablet to get to, if someone really cares about Route 42 on campus, We can quickly get to that part of the survey and make sure we're recording the info that's helpful to that person. Trying to cut out the frustration or the challenge with the technology. Let us quickly get people to where they need to be, and then type in what they're telling us.
Yep, gotcha.
And this is Gary, that 45 minutes was all of the routes, plus the general question. So if you just addressed one route, you could do that relatively quickly.
Yeah, and I think we're being realistic, right? We want to have the conversations that are helpful for the people who are talking with us. So when we're at these tabling events, we're not able to capture everything, right? We're not talking about all of those scenarios and all of the routes. We jump to what the person cares about and what they think, how they feel like it's going to impact them. So I do think we can have very valuable 3-minute conversations with people. And I think we can have very valuable 25-minute conversations with people. It just kind of depends on how they use transit and what makes the most, what they're most worried about, what they're most excited about. Talked with somebody today for 20 minutes about the different ways microtransit might work and how, kind of how that integrates with what we'd be doing from the fixed route side. And I also had, like a 2 or 3 minute conversation about a specific route, and the person felt like they got what they needed from that. So I think we'll see a spectrum in this work over the next month.
This is Laura. I was just wondering if it would be a good idea to connect with any health facilities to table there. I don't know that we have health necessarily represented in any of the tabling, or if I missed that or not. I know that could be harder because there's appointments related to that and that sort of thing, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
You have any first blush ideas on what that means? Like, is it us in the lobby of somewhere, or I'm trying to think of.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, like with public health, we have like WIC plus the clinic, there's Heartland, there's LMH and the various clinics as well. So I don't know exactly what the best place might be, because like I said, there are like appointment times and that sort of thing. And so that makes it a little bit more challenging, but I wanted to throw it out to the group to see if there could be some value in engaging with people who might use transit for health appointments.
I do want to call out to you. I saw, Freddie made a suggestion or a thought of just to be mindful of people. When we're engaging people with technology, we may not be able to see or use devices, and I think that's a good point. And that's where a lot of value of talking with people is being able to jot stuff down on paper and not having to rely on. The technology is good to have, but we don't always use it depending on skill set or needs of the people we're talking to. Okay. That's the content we had for tonight. Just a gut check on kind of how this early engagement's going. And I think got a lot of good thoughts from the group on how to do a little bit of course correction or, supplement kind of what we're doing to reach people better. I do want to pause again if there's any other insights, either related to the survey or outreach strategies that we should be thinking about. Making these next few weeks the most impactful that we can. I'm in a public participation workshop right now that says I should wait 7 seconds. People who are introverts will chime in after 7 seconds of silence. So making sure that happens. Well, please do reach out if you have, if you'd like to join us at a tabling event. I do think it provides a lot more insight to have a discussion with people. So I think it's a valuable thing, and we welcome your perspective and expertise at those events if you're able. If you have other group ideas or certain events that are coming up that would be a smart thing for us to tap into to reach people who would be impacted by this, please let us know. And that is the content we have for tonight. Boris or Rebecca, did you have anything else you'd like to touch on?
No, I just want to say that we're here as a resource for Adam, for your staff, and or anybody else in this call. So if we can help in any way to clarify any other recommendations or scenarios, then please reach out.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Our next meeting is November 23rd. So that will be shortly after the survey is closed and after a lot of this engagement. So hopeful that we have some good data and stories that we've heard from people at that time, but a little shorter of a meeting tonight. So please let us know anything else we can do. And we will see you in a month.
Thanks.